The auction hall thrummed like the inside of a dying star. Beneath chandeliers of liquid light, beings of 100 worlds traded laughter, cruelty, and lives. Elias Rune swayed on his feet, the taste of cheap synth wine and regret souring his tongue. Someone had dared Jaro Tellin to sell him, the worthless human mechanic, to the Aurelian court. He'd laughed at first until the crowd joined in. Now, as a towering alien broker wrapped him in data chains and listed his genetic metrics, laughter turned to horror. Across the room she appeared, Princess Kalith Vera, her skin shimmering like molten pearl, her gaze a quiet storm. She didn't bid, she merely spoke, and the auctioneer bowed. The hall fell silent. The joke had ended, but the story had just begun. The next morning, the Aurelian flagship Crown of Dawn sliced through the void. Elias woke inside a chamber of soft light and impossible architecture. No chains, no guards, only the hum of alien technology that seemed to breathe around him. His reflection on the mirrored wall shimmered, showing not just his face, but his uncertainty. Kalith entered wordlessly, the air bending faintly at her arrival. "Do humans always look so afraid?" she asked. Elias's jaw tightened, only when they're owned. Her lips curved into the faintest trace of amusement. "Owned? No! Acquired." The difference, he realized, was everything. The days aboard the Crown of Dawn blurred into ritual. Kalith tested his limits, not through pain, but through silence. She'd watch him repair a small drone, asking nothing yet observing everything. Elias spoke only when necessary, his defiance cooling into something sharper, fascination. One evening, she asked him what humans dream of. He hesitated, then said, "Freedom that doesn't end when you wake up." Her gaze flickered, unreadable. Later, alone, Kalith stood before the starlight and whispered the word, "freedom," as if tasting it for the first time. Court summons came unexpectedly. Kalith announced she would present her new companion before the High Regent. The palace attendants gasped. Such intimacy was reserved for bonded nobles, not humans. Elias followed her through corridors that bent reality itself, gravity folding, colors singing. In the throne hall, Saruan awaited, his silver carapace glistening. "A human pet," he mused. The princess grows whimsical. Kalith's voice cut through the chamber, soft but absolute. "He amuses me." Elias stood still, feeling eyes pierce him like blades. For the first time, Kalith seemed not his captor, but his shield. Later that night, on the royal balcony overlooking the Nebula Gardens, Kalith spoke without her crown. "They think me cold," she said. "Perhaps they are right. I was taught to command, not to feel." Elias leaned against the railing, the stars glimmering below them like distant candles. "Then unlearn it," he said. Her eyes lifted. "Curious, you presume to teach me?" "No," he replied, "only to remind you." Silence stretched, tender and dangerous. Then, softly, she laughed. A sound both alien and heartbreakingly human. Rumor travels faster than light within the palace. Servants whispered about the human who dared look the princess in the eye. By the time Elias entered the grand conservatory, he could feel the glances, curious, amused, disgusted. Kalith had summoned him for the court's daily ritual of discourse, a debate on the ethics of sovereignty. It was meant as theater, not philosophy. But when she asked the assembled nobles what defines power, Elias spoke before he could stop himself. "Power is what remains when you can no longer command fear." The silence afterward was so complete that even the bioluminescent vines seemed to dim. Kalith's expression didn't betray anger, only fascination. He'd spoken out of turn, yet somehow... She smiled. After the gathering, Saruan confronted Kalith in the Hall of Echoes. "You let it speak," he hissed, voice layered with centuries of contempt. Kalith met his gaze, unblinking. He spoke truth, she said simply. Soryun's features tightened, the light within his crystalline eyes flickering. Truth is a weapon, princess. In the wrong mouth, it cuts deep. When she turned away, her steps left faint ripples of light across the marble floor. Alone again, Soryun whispered to the shadows. Then we shall see how sharp the human's tongue truly is. Caliph began visiting Elias's quarters more often. What started as curiosity became conversation, and conversation turned to confession. He told her about Earth's oceans, its storms, its silence. She listened as if hearing music for the first time. One night he asked, "Why do you stay surrounded by those who fear you?" She paused before answering. "Because fear obeys. Love, I am told, does not." The words lingered between them like smoke. Elias smiled faintly. "Then maybe you've been given the wrong teachers." Caliph looked away, but her voice softened. "Then teach me, human." The following evening, Elias was escorted to dine at Caliph's side during a diplomatic banquet. A calculated gesture meant to provoke the court. Whispers cut like knives across the hall. Midway through, an ambassador from the crystalline world of Votha sneered. "Is it true, princess, that humans are trained for obedience?" Elias's voice was steady. "Only when we're mistaken for something less than alive." The tension thickened. Caliph's eyes flashed, but not in anger. She raised her glass. "To mistakes," she said, and drank. The hall erupted in uneasy laughter, but the meaning was clear. Her loyalty was no longer to tradition. Later, in the quiet of her private observatory, Caliph stood before the stars. "You make them hate me," she said softly. Elias approached, his reflection merging with hers in the glass. "No," he said, "I make them see you." She turned to face him, eyes shimmering with something fragile beneath the fire. "You don't understand. To be seen is to be vulnerable." He nodded. "Then maybe that's what power really is." Caliph's composure wavered just once, long enough for her hand to brush his. The moment was brief, but galaxies shifted in its wake. Weeks passed, and rumors evolved into prophecy. The court whispered of the human voice that spoke against divine hierarchy. The words Elias had said in jest became banners for the discontent. Across the colony's lower castes began to echo him, slaves quoting the servant of a princess. Caliph read intercepted transmissions in silence, the weight of it heavy between them. "You've started something," she said. Elias only shook his head. "No. You did when you listened." Outside her chambers, guards doubled their posts. Soryun's gaze lingered longer than before. The Empire was trembling, and it began with laughter that had turned into truth. Regent Soryun convened a secret council beneath the palace's crystalline core. "Our princess is compromised," he said, his voice echoing through the translucent vaults. "She allows a creature of decay to whisper treason into her heart." The nobles murmured in unease, some fearful, others intrigued. Soryun's claws traced the air, conjuring an image of Elias' face projected in light. The human must be removed, cleanly, publicly, and without her knowledge. A single question cut through the air. And if she resists... Soryun's eyes gleamed cold. Then she will learn, as all rulers must, that mercy has no throne. That night, Caliph found Elias alone in the observation wing. He was watching a colony ship depart, a pinprick of light vanishing into the void. "Do humans ever stop missing what they've lost?" she asked. Elias didn't answer immediately. "No. We just learned to pretend it was never ours." She studied him quietly. "And what do you think you've lost here?" His voice softened. "You, if I'm not careful." For the first time, her breath caught. Then she looked away, masking emotion beneath ritual calm. "Be careful, Elias Rune. Some things are not meant to be spoken." During a royal summit, an explosion shattered the Sanctum Dome. The blast tore through the hall, scattering crystal shards like meteors. Guards rushed in chaos. Kaleth's instincts surged. She shielded Elias with a telekinetic flare, her luminous aura burning against the smoke. When the haze cleared, Sorun appeared, unscathed, composed, and ready with accusation. "Assassination," he declared, gesturing to the wreckage. The human was seen near the detonator. Gasps rippled through the court. Elias stood in stunned silence. Kaleth's eyes locked with his, confusion and fury entwined. In the echo of destruction, their fragile trust began to fracture. Warren, Elias was confined within the ship's biocell, a chamber that pulsed like a living heart. Kaleth visited only once, standing beyond the barrier that separated them. "Tell me it isn't true," she said, voice breaking under a weight no crown could bear. "You think I could hurt you?" he replied, his tone low but steady. She didn't answer, only stared, torn between duty and belief. The cell's glow cast rippling patterns across their faces, merging human and alien light into something neither could name. "If I wanted power," Elias whispered. Her breath trembled. "Then, perhaps, that was your greatest deception." Kaleth sat in the silent chamber of judgment, the walls pulsing faintly with the Dominion's neural network. The High Council had convened, their voices transmitted through light itself. "Your pet has threatened Imperial stability," they declared. "He must be unmade." Kaleth's pulse remained steady, though her hands trembled behind folded sleeves. She had faced wars, coronations, betrayals, but never choice. Sorwin's calm voice slithered through the chamber. "Compassion weakens command." Kaleth's gaze lifted. "And fear," she said, "poisons it." The council fell quiet, unsure if she'd spoken rebellion or revelation. In her silence afterward, something ancient within her cracked. Deep within the palace labyrinth, Mother Luma awaited Kaleth in the Hall of Seeds, a temple older than the Empire itself. Her voice echoed without sound. "You have forgotten what your blood once promised." Kaleth bowed her head. "I was raised to serve the Dominion." Lumina's form shimmered, half corporeal, half light. "You were born to guide it beyond fear." Kaleth hesitated, her composure fraying. "If I choose him, I destroy everything I am." The seer smiled faintly. "Then destroy. What grows from ruin is truth." For the first time, Kaleth's eyes filled with tears of light. Meanwhile, Elias endured interrogation under the Regent's command. He refused to speak, even as the chamber's psychic field twisted his memories. Sorun watched from behind a veil of energy, fascinated by the human's resistance. "You are fragile," Sorun murmured. "Yet you cling to defiance as if it were a weapon." Elias's smile was faint but real. "Maybe it is." The Regent leaned closer. "You will break, then break me," Elias whispered, "and see what I become." For the first time in centuries, Sorun hesitated. He sensed something unfamiliar, an echo of will that no Aurelian design could measure. Kaleth descended alone into the spire, her footsteps dissolving in mist. Guards withdrew at her command. Inside, Elias lifted his head as she approached, eyes dim but unbroken. "You shouldn't be here," he said. "I should be anywhere you are," she replied. The containment field shimmered between them. She raised her palm, and the field flickered out with a resonant hum. "You're freeing a criminal?" Elias murmured. "No," she said softly. "I'm freeing myself." For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then she reached for him, and the Empire shifted course. Unseen but irreversible, alarms erupted through the palace as Kaleth and Elias fled through the glass corridors. Soldiers poured in from every direction, their armor reflecting her royal insignia. She turned, her voice amplified with psychic force. "Stand down." None obeyed. The air trembled, torn by energy fire. Elias pulled her behind a fallen arch. "You can't fight them all," he said. Her reply came fierce and trembling. "I don't need to. Just enough to reach the ship." Together, they ran toward the hangars, blazing light, each step shedding a lifetime of obedience. Above them, the Empire roared awake to the sound of its own rebellion. The stolen vessel cut through the dark like a wound of light. Kalith piloted in silence, her fingers moving over the living controls as if in prayer. Behind her, Elias tended to burns that still glowed faintly from the escape. "You could have left me," he said. "I did," she replied softly, eyes on the stars. "But I couldn't stay gone, for the first time." Her voice carried no authority, only fatigue, and something gentler. The stars ahead shimmered crimson. Dominion fleets were burning the outer colonies. "They'll call it treason," Elias said. Kalith turned toward him. "Then let us redefine the word." They hid among the derelict moons of Varos IV, a graveyard of forgotten machines. Kalith moved through the wreckage, luminous hair dimmed to blend with the metal dusk. Elias watched her kneel beside a shattered drone, its design older than her empire. "You once ruled all this," he said quietly. "No," she corrected. "I inherited its ghosts." Her hand brushed the metal hull. The drone flickered alive, projecting images of Aurelia's early wars. Her gaze softened. "My people built wonders and forgot why." Elias placed a hand on her shoulder. "Then build again. This time for something that lives." Their escape drew more than pursuit. It drew allies. Outcasts, miners, and deserters began answering Kalith's encrypted call, rallying to a new symbol. The human who defied a crown. Elias spoke before thousands aboard the renegade flagship Eclipsera. "You were told to kneel," he said, voice raw but steady. "Now you stand, not for me, but for yourselves." Kalith watched from the shadows, awe softening her pride. In his defiance, she saw what her empire had lost, a voice that belonged to everyone. When he finished, they cheered not for rebellion, but for rebirth. The first battle came at dawn over the molten world of Korath. Dominion dreadnoughts emerged from the void, their hulls burning gold. Kalith stood at the command deck, beside Elias, her voice calm as the storm unfolded. "Fire pattern 3, she ordered, and the rebel ships answered as one. Light and shadow collided in symphony. When an explosion tore through the flank, Elias grabbed her arm, pulling her to safety. "You could have died," he said. She met his gaze. "So could you." He smiled through the smoke. "Then maybe we finally live." After the battle, silence. The Eclipsera drifted through the debris field of victory and loss. Kalith walked among the wounded, healing what she could with her energy, her light dimming with each touch. Elias followed, his hands stained with soot, his voice low. "You don't have to bear all of it," he said. She looked up at him, exhausted. "Yes," she whispered, "because I once bore none." He touched her hand, and for the first time, she let it remain there. Outside, the last Dominion ship fell into Korath's burning sky, an empire dissolving in the glow of its own rebirth. The fleet gathered at the edge of the Varan expanse. Hundreds of rebel ships, engines humming like a heartbeat. Kalith stood before the command table, its holographic projection mapping the Dominion's defenses. "We strike at the capital not to conquer, but to free," she said. Faces from every world turned toward her. Humans, Aurelians, beings of light and shadow. Elias stepped forward. "And if they call us traitors?" She met his gaze. "Then we make treason sacred." The silence that followed was not fear. It was belief. The old order was already trembling under the weight of a single shared purpose. The Dominion struck first. Fleets poured from hyperspace in golden arcs of fire. Kalith's voice rang through every ship. "Hold formation." Elias gripped the controls beside her, sweat beading along his brow. Outside, space itself seemed to burn. Dominion cruisers moved in perfect formation. Centuries of discipline against newfound hope. The rebels broke ranks, then reformed around Calith's commands. "Center the charge," she said. We cut through their pride. The moment she spoke, a column of plasma fire cleaved the void. For the first time, Aurelia's capital defenses faltered. The rebellion had found its rhythm. They breached the atmosphere. Aurelia's surface shimmered below like a wounded jewel. Elias led the ground assault, his voice transmitted across legions. "We take the palace alive. No vengeance. Only truth." He sprinted across marble plains under a rain of burning debris, plasma fire illuminating the horizon. Inside, Calith descended with a guard of light, her aura blazing, brighter than the city's towers. Soruan's voice echoed from every speaker. "My child returns to her cradle of power." She stepped through the ruins and replied, "No, old one. I return to end it." The throne hall was unrecognizable, fractured, burning, flooded with auric mist. Soruan waited amid the ruins, his crystalline armor cracked but unbroken. "You would undo eternity for a mortal," he said. Calith approached, her voice trembling yet firm. "For truth." The regent smiled thinly. "Truth dies when order does." Elias entered behind her, weapon raised. Soruan's gaze fell on him, ancient and cold. "And what will you build from ashes, human?" Elias answered simply, "A world where you'd have no throne." Soruan lunged, his blade of light striking against Calith's telekinetic shield. The war of gods had begun. Their battle was not of strength but will. Calith's energy flared, meeting Soruan's in a clash that shattered the floor. Elias fought beside her, his human endurance defying cosmic power. When Soruan struck a final blow toward Calith, Elias stepped in front, absorbing the hit that should have ended her. His body collapsed into her arms, his blood glowing faintly where her light touched it. Rage became transcendence. Calith's aura erupted into blinding radiance. She drove her hand into Soruan's chest, releasing a burst that ended both his reign and the Dominion's illusion of divinity. When silence returned, she whispered over Elias's fading pulse, "You weren't my weakness. You were my awakening." Dawn rose over the shattered citadel. The fires of Aurelia dimmed into mist, the warships hovering silent above the ruins. Calith stood upon the marble steps, Elias's body resting before her. The Empire had no anthem now, only wind through broken glass. Around her, survivors gathered, rebels and soldiers alike, no longer certain who they served. She raised her voice, soft but unwavering. "The Dominion is over. The age of command is done." The words spread through the networks, carried by light, by code, by prayer. When she knelt beside Elias again, his chest rose faintly, the pulse of her healing touch answering his. Elias awoke 3 days later, beneath Aurelia's twin suns. The palace was gone, replaced by open sky and the scent of renewal. Calith sat nearby, her aura dimmed, but serene. "You died," she said softly. He smiled weakly. "So did you." They laughed, the sound fragile but real. In the distance, rebuilding had begun, not of monuments, but of homes. Calith touched his hand. "The council wants to crown me again." Elias turned toward her. "And what do you want?" Her eyes lifted to the suns. "To rule nothing, to belong." He squeezed her hand. "Then we'll build that." Weeks turned into months. The Dominion's surviving world signed the accord, no longer an empire, but a communion. Calith refused the throne, accepting instead the title of First Voice. Elias became her counterpart, the speaker of the accord. Together they traveled from world to world, not as rulers, but witnesses. In each gathering, Caliph would say, "Equality is not granted. It is remembered." And Elias would add, "And remembered, it becomes truth." Slowly, the stars began to heal, no longer divided by blood or species, but joined by the echo of one impossible love. On the anniversary of the rebellion, they returned to the ruins of the old palace. The walls were overgrown with luminous vines, nature reclaiming what arrogance had abandoned. Elias traced his hand along the ancient stone. "This was where you owned me," he said. Caliph smiled faintly. "No, this was where I learned what ownership costs." She turned to him. "Do you regret it?" He shook his head. "Not a single second." In the silence that followed, she kissed him, not as a queen, but as a woman unbound. Around them, the ruins glowed brighter, as if remembering joy. Years later, travelers spoke of the two lights of Aurelia, a queen of fire and a man of shadow who walked among the stars, teaching that power meant empathy and love was the only true order. From their union grew generations of worlds that no longer bowed to thrones, but to conscience. In the end, the galaxy forgot the war but remembered the laughter that began it. Somewhere beyond the edges of map space, two figures stood hand in hand before a newborn sun, watching its first rays spill across the void. It was not conquest that endured, but connection.